My father poured the deep red wine, his smile a cold, thin line that never reached his eyes. He handed me the glass, the crystal cool against my trembling fingers. To my millionaire son, he said the words smooth, but laced with something I couldn't name. It wasn't pride. It was something darker, something predatory. I gave him a small nod, my heart hammering against my ribs, and when he turned to greet a guest, my hand moved in a swift, silent motion, swapping my glass with his. I held my breath, the world narrowing to the two identical glasses on the table. 35 minutes later, in the middle of a sentence, he choked. His hand flew to his chest, his eyes wide with a terror I recognized because I had felt it myself just a few weeks prior. He collapsed to the floor as my mother's scream ripped through the cheerful party music. In that moment, watching him gasp for air on the Persian rug, I didn't feel relief. I felt a horrifying certainty. He hadn't just tried to kill me. He had done this before. I'm about to share something that tore my entire world apart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My name is Ethan Carter, and if you believe a story like this needs to be told, please subscribe to follow my journey. It means more than you know. To understand how we got to that horrifying moment, you need to know what happened a few weeks earlier on my mother's birthday. On the surface, my life was the American dream. I'm 36, living in a luxury apartment in Austin, Texas, after selling my tech startup in a $6 million USD deal, a sum that meant I'd never have to work again. Millions in the bank, no wife, no kids. It was a perfect life, stained by one person, my father. Richard Walker was once a big name in real estate, but a string of bad deals had turned him into a bitter, controlling man. He wasn't interested in my life, only my wallet. That morning, standing in front of my mirror, I adjusted the dark green shirt my mother loved and braced myself. The whole family was gathering at their home in a suburb of Philadelphia, and I had to face the man who only ever looked at me like I was a vault to be cracked. That coldness was still a mercy compared to my childhood when his alcoholism fueled random, brutal beatings. Those scars never fade, and seeing him makes them bleed again. My luxury SUV ate up the miles as I drove to their house, the radio failing to drown out the dread in my head. But then I saw her. My mother, Margaret Maggie Walker, was standing at the door, her smile radiant. Her hug and the familiar scent of lavender perfume was a balm on my wounded soul. The party in the backyard was beautiful with lanterns and jazz music. My mother, elegant even in her mid-60s, was the heart of it all, my anchor in the storm my father created. He stood in a corner, nursing a glass of red wine, his eyes like a predator's tracking me. I tried to stay away, but he cornered me by the buffet table. "Ethan," he said, holding out a glass of shimmering red wine. "Have a drink with your father. A special glass just for you." That word, special, and the smirk on his face sent a warning flare through my gut. Not wanting to upset my mother, who was laughing nearby with my Aunt Linda, I took the glass. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice tight. I took a small sip. It tasted rich, a little bitter, but fine. He watched me, then nodded with a chilling sense of finality. Just minutes later, the world began to tilt and blur. The happy sounds of the party warped and faded as if coming from underwater. My heart pounded. The air grew thick and my legs gave out from under me as I tried to get to my mom. The last thing I remember was the sound of my wine glass shattering on the grass. I woke up in my old childhood bed, my head throbbing, my body feeling like a dead weight. My mother was beside me, her eyes red and swollen, her hands clutching mine. "Ethan, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh God, I was so scared." "What happened?" I mumbled, trying to piece things together. The image of the wine glass, my father's smile, and the dizziness came rushing back like a wave. I looked at my mother, searching for answers in her eyes, but she only shook her head, stroking my hair the way she did when I was a child. "You passed out in the garden. Your father said you drank too much, but I know you didn't. You only had one glass, didn't you?" She looked at me, her eyes full of worry. I nodded, my throat dry. One glass. Just one glass of wine for my father. I held my mother's hand, feeling her fingers tremble slightly. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I wanted to say something to reassure her, but I was drowning in a sea of doubt myself. That glass of wine, my father's cold smile, and the sensation of being drained of life all were pieces of a puzzle that didn't yet fit together. "Ethan, I'm so worried," my mother said, her voice softening as if afraid someone outside might hear. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the garden where I had collapsed. "What you went through, the dizziness, the shortness of breath, losing consciousness. I've seen it before. It was just like my father." I froze, my heart pounding. "Grandfather?" I asked, my voice hoarse. I had only met him a few times as a child, a tall man with a booming laugh, but my mother had told me he died suddenly when she was young. "A heart attack," she had said. She turned back to me, her eyes red, her hands clasped tightly as if to keep herself from falling apart. "Yes, my father collapsed like that too after an evening of drinking with friends. He was healthy, Ethan, just like you. No illnesses, no warning signs. But the next morning he didn't wake up." Her voice trembled, each word seeming to be dredged up from an old buried pain. I stood and walked to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, I don't think it was an illness." I hesitated, unsure whether to voice the suspicion screaming in my head, but her eyes, filled with both fear and hope, compelled me to speak. "I get regular checkups. You know that. My heart, my blood. Everything's normal. No signs of any hereditary conditions." She looked at me, her eyes widening as if she had just realized something horrific. "Then, what do you think happened?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, feeling as though I were standing on the edge of an abyss. "Mom, I think there was something wrong with the glass of wine Dad gave me." The words spilled out, and I saw her step back, her hand covering her mouth, her face paling. "Ethan, what are you saying? Richard Walker is your father." Her voice was filled with pain, but I caught a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But didn't you notice he kept emphasizing that the glass was special? I drank it and then I collapsed. I wasn't drunk, Mom. I only took one sip." I paused, looking directly into her eyes. "You thought it was strange too, didn't you?" Dad said. "I drank too much, but you know the truth." My mother sank into a chair, her trembling hands clutching a cold cup of tea. She was silent, but I could see the struggle within her between her love for my father and her maternal instincts. I don't want to believe it," she said, her voice breaking. "But it's true. I did find it odd. Your father insisted you were drunk, but I looked at you and I knew you weren't." We sat there in silence, like two weary travelers lost in a storm. I took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Mom, I'll find out what happened. I don't want to suspect Dad, but I need to know the truth." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "Be careful, Ethan. If you're right, I won't let anyone hurt you." As I left the house, I felt both relieved and weighed down. My mother believed me, at least in part, but the suspicion about my father, even as a mere thought, was like a crack in the foundation of our family. I drove home, my resolve burning fiercely. I would uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. After the conversation with my mother, I felt like I was walking a tightrope, each step trembling. The suspicion about my father clung to me like a shadow, but I had no proof. Only the glass of wine, his cold smile, and the gut feeling that I had narrowly escaped death. I wanted to forget to believe it was all in my imagination, but every time I looked in the mirror, I saw my own eyes. The eyes of someone who couldn't stand still. The annual family holiday dinner arrived, bringing with it the biting cold of the late fall. My mother called, her voice gentle but filled with hope. "Ethan, come home for dinner, will you? Just one evening." I wanted to refuse to stay far away from the house, now shrouded in darkness, but I couldn't bear to disappoint her. "I'll come," I said, though my heart felt heavy as lead. The old house appeared under the glow of dusk, the light from the windows spilling out like small flames. I stepped inside, the smell of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air, but it did nothing to warm me. My mother hugged me, her smile still radiant, but I saw the worry hidden in her eyes. My father sat at the head of the dining table, a glass of red wine in hand, his gray suit impeccably pressed. He looked at me, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Ethan, are you feeling all right after that fall in the garden?" His voice was even, but I could hear the mockery in it. I sat across from him, forcing a calm expression. "I'm fine, Father. Thank you." But my hands clenched under the table, my nails digging into my palms. My mother bustled about, bringing out dishes, her chatter with Aunt Linda filling the air. But my focus was solely on my father. His gaze followed me like a predator stalking its prey. When the main course was served, my father stood raising his glass. "To family, to the holidays," he said, his eyes locked on mine. He handed me a glass of red wine, its color glinting under the candlelight like fresh blood. "Drink, Ethan. This one's special." The word special rang out identical to the night of my mother's birthday. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming. I wouldn't let it happen again. I took the glass, my fingers trembling slightly. My mother was in the kitchen fetching dessert. My father watched me, his gaze challenging. In that moment, I knew I had to act. I pretended to drop my napkin, bending down to pick it up, and in a split second, I swapped my glass with his on the table. The movement was lightning fast, unnoticed by anyone. I sat up straight, my heart pounding like a drum, sweat trickling down my forehead. My father raised his glass, took a large sip, then turned to talk to Uncle Mark. I gripped his glass, now mine, but didn't drink. I waited, watching. 12 minutes. 25 minutes. Nothing. I started to think I was paranoid, but then, about 50 minutes later, my father stopped mid-sentence. He clutched his chest, his breathing labored. "Richard Walker, what's wrong?" my mother cried, rushing to his side. He staggered the wine glass, falling to the floor and shattering. He clutched his head, his face ashen, then collapsed. My mother's scream tore through the air. The dining table erupted into chaos, and Linda calling for an ambulance. I shot to my feet, but not out of fear, because a horrifying truth was dawning on me. Dizziness, shortness of breath, fainting, just like me on my mother's birthday, just like my grandfather as my mother had described. "Call an ambulance now," I shouted, but my eyes stayed fixed on my father. He lay on the floor, his breathing faint, his glassy eyes staring at me. In that moment, I saw a flicker of panic in his gaze, as if he knew what he had just drunk. The ambulance arrived, and the paramedics took him away. My mother sobbed, clutching my hand. "Ethan, what's happening? Why is this happening?" I hugged her, but my mind was reeling. If I hadn't swapped the glasses, I would be the one lying there. The thought hit me like a knife. "Mom, I need to take a sample of the wine from that glass," I whispered. She looked at me, her eyes filled with horror, but she nodded. I knew she was thinking what I was thinking. When everyone left, I quietly collected a sample of the wine left in my father's glass, the one meant for me. I poured it into a small vial and tucked it into my pocket. That night, I didn't sleep. The image of my father collapsing his eyes and the red wine haunted me. I was right. My father had tried to kill me, and now I would prove it. The days following, I lived like a fugitive, not fleeing from someone else, but from my own thoughts. The image of my father collapsing, the panic in his eyes, and the small vial of wine I kept in my coat pocket haunted me. Each night I lay staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was going mad, or if I had truly come close to dying at my father's hands. But I knew I couldn't stop. I needed the truth, even if it tore our family apart. I contacted a private laboratory in Philadelphia, a discreet place I'd heard about. I didn't dare send the wine sample through the mail. Too risky. Instead, I drove there, the vial tucked in my coat pocket like a tiny bomb. The technician, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses, looked at me curiously as I handed her the vial. "I need it tested for anything unusual," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as fast as possible. She nodded, asking no questions. 4 days, she said. Those 4 days felt like 3 years. I returned to my apartment, locked the door, and drew the curtains as if afraid my father might appear at any moment. My mother called, her voice frail. "Ethan, your father's doing better." The hospital said he went into shock, but they couldn't find a cause. "Do you know anything I heard?" The doubt in her voice, but I didn't dare tell her. "I'm looking into it, Mom." "Don't worry." But I was the one dying inside from worry. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was the technician. "Mr. Carter, we have the results. You should come in." Her voice was cold professional, but I sensed the gravity behind it. I raced to the lab, my heart pounding. She handed me a report pointing to a bolded line. "Barbiturate high concentration." "It's a sedative," she explained him. This dose was enough to cause unconsciousness, even death, if not treated in time. I stood frozen, the paper trembling in my hand. Barbiturate, not alcohol, not drunkenness, not illness. Someone had deliberately put poison in my glass of wine. And I knew who. I looked at the technician, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Thank you. Don't tell anyone about this." She nodded, her eyes full of sympathy. On the drive back, I circled the city, my mind reeling. My father, the man who raised me, the man I had once tried to please despite his coldness. Why then, I remembered my wealth. The $6 million deal, no wife, no children. If I died, my father was the legal heir. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. He didn't just want to control me. He wanted me gone. I parked by the Schuylkill River, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The cold wind blew, but I felt nothing except the anger burning inside me. My father had tried to kill me not once, but twice. And if I hadn't swapped the glasses, I wouldn't be standing here. I gripped the report tightly, resolute. I would confront him not for revenge, but so that my mother and I could be free. My father was discharged from the hospital a week later, looking weaker, but his eyes still sharp as a blade. My mother wanted me to visit, but I knew this wasn't an ordinary visit. I brought the lab report tucked in my coat pocket like a protective talisman. As I stepped into the old house, I saw my mother in the kitchen preparing tea. "Margaret Maggie Walker, you're here." She smiled, but I saw the sadness in her eyes. "Your father's in the living room." I nodded, took a deep breath, and walked in. My father was seated in an armchair, a glass of wine again in his hand. He looked at me, that familiar smirk curling his lips. "Ethan Carter, come to visit your old man. That's good of you." His voice was light, but I could sense the weariness beneath it. "I need to talk to you privately," I said, my voice firm. My mother was in the kitchen out of earshot. He raised an eyebrow, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the lab report and placed it on the table in front of him. "Barbiturate," I said, staring into his eyes. "In the wine you gave me." "Enough to kill. Explain." His face stiffened, but he quickly regained his composure. "What are you talking about, Ethan Carter poison? You've lost your mind." He laughed, but the laugh was forced, unable to mask the panic in his eyes. Don't lie, I said, my voice cold as stone. I swapped the glasses with you. That's why you collapsed, not me. I have proof. The lab confirmed it. If you don't tell the truth, I'm taking this to the police. Silence. Only the ticking of the clock and my father's heavy breathing filled the room. Then, like a wall crumbling, he slumped, his hands covering his face. Ethan, forgive me, he whispered, his voice breaking. I only meant to knock you out. I was going to forge a will, take your money. I'm in too much debt, Ethan. I had no way out. I stood there looking at the man who was once my father, now just a desperate shell. His confession cut like a knife. But strangely, I didn't feel anger, only sadness, deep and heavy. Why, Dad? I asked, my voice. I'm your son. He didn't answer, only bowed his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. I thought of my mother, of the years she spent living with a man like him. I wanted to call the police to make him pay, but I knew it would destroy her. I won't go to the police, I said, my voice trembling. But from now on, stay away from me and don't ever touch Mom. I turned and walked away, leaving him in the cold room. As I stepped out, I saw my mother standing at the door, her eyes red. She had heard everything. I hugged her, feeling her body tremble. Ethan, she whispered, but said nothing more. I knew from this moment everything would change forever. I left the living room, leaving my father sitting there, his head bowed like a broken statue. His confession echoed in my mind, each word a fresh cut. I had thought confronting him would bring relief, but it didn't. Only pain, heavy and cold. As I stepped into the hallway, trying to hold myself together, I saw my mother standing at the kitchen door, her hands gripping the frame, her face pale. Ethan. Her voice trembled, her eyes red and brimming with tears. I froze. She had heard it all. The confrontation. My father's confession. Everything. I walked to her, wrapping her in a hug, feeling her tremble in my arms. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered, as if she were the one at fault. I never imagined Richard Walker could. I led her to the garden where the lantern still glowed faintly from her birthday. We sat on the wooden bench, the silence broken only by the rustle of the wind through the trees. I held her hand, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she took a deep breath, her voice steadier. Ethan, I heard everything, what your father said. I can't believe it, but there's something I need to tell you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with both pain and resolve. The symptoms you had on my birthday, they were exactly like my father's. He collapsed, too, after an evening of drinking with Richard Walker. She paused, as if summoning the courage to continue. My father died soon after. Everyone said it was a heart attack, but I always found it strange. He was healthy, no illnesses, and after he died, Richard Walker inherited nearly all of my family's wealth. I felt my blood run cold. You suspect Dad was involved in Grandpa's death? I asked, my voice a whisper. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't want to think it, Ethan. I loved your father. I wanted to believe in him, but now I'm afraid I've been living with a monster. Her words were like a cold wind, stripping away any remaining illusions. I hugged her tighter, feeling her pain merge with mine. Mom, if you're right, we need to find the truth. I said, my voice firm. Not just for me, but for Grandpa. And for you. She nodded, wiping her tears. I'll help you, Ethan. No matter what happens, I want to know the truth. We sat there under the dim moonlight, mother and son, now allies, in a battle neither of us could have foreseen. I knew the road ahead would be painful, but I was no longer afraid. With my mother by my side, I was ready to face anything. The day after, my mother and I began our quest for the truth. We didn't talk much, only acted like two soldiers in a silent battle. I suggested starting with the safe in my father's study, where he kept important documents. My mother agreed, though I saw her tremble as she opened the door to that room. "I haven't been in here in a long time," she said softly. Richard didn't like me touching his things. The safe sat in the corner, a cold block of steel. My mother remembered the code, their wedding date, a detail that stung my heart. Inside, we found real estate papers, contracts, and an old, worn, leather-bound notebook. This was my father's journal. My mother whispered, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. The scrolled handwriting of my grandfather emerged, chronicling his final days. One entry stopped us cold. "Richard's acting strange. Last night after a glass of wine, I felt dizzy, short of breath. I suspect he means me harm if something happens to me. Investigate." My mother and I looked at each other speechless. My grandfather's words, like a message from the past, confirmed our fears. "Mom, we need experts," I said. I contacted a private investigator, Mr. Nolan, who had helped a friend in a lawsuit. I also called a lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, who specialized in criminal cases. Both agreed to meet with us. Mr. Nolan suggested exhuming my grandfather's body to re-examine the autopsy report. If there was poison, traces could still be found, even after all these years, he said. With Ms. Ramirez's help, we obtained a court order. The exhumation process was slow, but the final results hit like a tidal wave. The new autopsy report revealed that my grandfather had been poisoned with a sedative closely related to barbiturates. Not a heart attack, not natural causes. We dug deeper. Mr. Nolan uncovered forged documents and my father's inheritance records, mismatched signatures, irregular transfer agreements. Each piece of evidence was a brick building a wall of guilt around my father. My mother sat beside me, reading each document, her face growing harder. "I lived with him for decades," she said, her voice breaking. "I knew nothing, Ethan." I took her hand. "It's not your fault. He deceived us both." But I saw a fire in her eyes. Not grief, but determination. She was no longer the submissive wife. She was a mother, a daughter seeking justice. My mother didn't hesitate. "I'll sue him," she said, her voice steady as stone. "Not just for you, but for my father. Richard has to pay." I had never seen her so strong. We prepared everything with Ms. Ramirez and Mr. Nolan. The file was thick, the lab report on the wine, my grandfather's journal, the new autopsy report, and the forged documents. Each page was a knife into my father's past. The trial took place on a gray, rainy day. I sat beside my mother, holding her hand, feeling her icy fingers. My father stood in the dock, no longer the powerful man I once knew. He looked aged, his eyes hollow, but he still tried to deny the charges. "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice weak. "But the evidence was undeniable." Ms. Ramirez laid out every detail. The wine laced with barbiturate, the intent to kill me. My grandfather's journal, the autopsy report, and the forged documents proving my father had poisoned my grandfather to seize the family's wealth. The prosecutor called my mother to the witness stand. She stood tall, her voice clear, recounting the years of living with a manipulative husband and the pain of learning he had killed her father. I watched her, my heart swelling with pride mixed with sorrow. My father had no chance. The jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty attempted murder for me and first-degree murder for my grandfather. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As the police led him away, he turned to look at my mother and me, his eyes empty. I felt no triumph, only a void where our family once stood. After the trial, my mother moved in with me in Austin, Texas. The old house was sold away for us to close the door on the past. My mother found peace free from my father's manipulation. She started gardening, tending to lavender blooms, and every afternoon we sat drinking tea, talking about simple things. I looked at her, seeing her smile return, though tinged with lingering sadness. "Are you okay, Mom?" I asked one day as the sunset bathed the garden in gold. She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I'm okay, Ethan. Justice has been served. My father can rest in peace, and you're safe. That's all I need." I found peace, too. Though the scars from my father would never fully heal, I continued my work. But now I lived for my mother, for the simple moments we shared. Under the sunset's glow, I knew we had emerged from the darkness together. 3 years. "Ethan, look, my mother." Margaret Maggie Walker called out. She was sitting on the oak swing, a cup of tea in her hands, her smile now serene, untroubled. "That butterfly, it's back." I followed her gaze. A vibrant orange monarch butterfly was fluttering over the flowers we had cultivated together. This garden was our sanctuary, a testament to a new life rebuilt from ashes. My mother had found her peace here, and protecting that peace had become my sole purpose. But even in this haven, I never truly let my guard down. I'd had a state-of-the-art security system installed, and I still sometimes flinched at an unfamiliar noise from the street, like the black sedan that had been parked at the corner all morning. It was probably just a visitor for a neighbor, I told myself, but my eyes kept drifting back to it. The past taught me that the most horrific dangers often begin with the smallest, most ordinary details. "I'll go get some more cookies," I said, keeping my voice casual. Inside the house was quiet. I placed the cookies on a tray and glanced out the front window. The black car was gone. A wave of relief washed over me, only to be replaced by an icy chill that crawled up my spine. On the doormat, there was something that didn't belong. My heart began to beat faster. I signaled for my mother to stay put and cautiously opened the door. It was a small, old wooden box with no sender's name or address. It was exquisitely crafted, yet it emanated a somber aura. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of worn red velvet, was an old-fashioned brass key. It was mottled with oxidation, and the head was carved into the shape of a blue heron. Tucked beside the key was a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. There were only 3 words written in a firm, sharp script. "Blue Heron's debt is due." I stood frozen, the key suddenly feeling immensely heavy in my palm. Blue Heron. I had never heard that name. This wasn't a misplaced package. This was a message. Someone knew we were here. Someone knew about my father's past. A past I was beginning to realize I never truly understood at all. The peace of the last 3 years shattered like glass. The darkness I thought we had locked away behind prison bars with my father, it turned out, was still out there, and it had just knocked on our door. "Ethan." "What is it, darling?" My mother's voice, laced with a new and unfamiliar tremor, pulled me back from the edge. She had come inside from the garden, her half-empty cup of tea left forgotten on the swing. Her eyes, which had finally started to lose their haunted shadows, were now fixed on the small, dark wooden box in my hand. I tried to force a reassuring smile, a pathetic attempt to shield her that we both knew was futile. "It's nothing, Mom." I lied, my voice cracking, betraying me instantly. I tried to close the box to hide the key and its cryptic message behind my back, but her hand, surprisingly strong, rested on my arm. "Don't," she said, her voice soft but firm, forged in the fires of the last 3 years. "Don't lie to me, Ethan. Whatever it is, we face it together. She had earned that right." Margaret Maggie Walker was not the same woman my father had terrorized. She was a survivor, and her quiet strength was now the bedrock of our small, fragile world. I relented, my shoulders slumping in defeat and fear. I opened my hand and showed her the box. She took it from me, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings. She lifted the lid, her gaze falling first on the tarnished brass key, then on the folded note. I watched her read the 3 short words, and I saw a wave of pure confusion wash over her face, followed by the cold dread of the unknown. Blue Heron. She whispered the name, a foreign sound, on her lips. What does Blue Heron's debt mean? I don't know. I admitted the feeling of helplessness, of venom in my veins, but I know this wasn't a mistake. Someone sent this. Someone wanted us to find it. That night's sleep was a forgotten luxury. Our home, once a sanctuary meticulously crafted to feel safe, now felt porous, vulnerable. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves against the window pane sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I sat in front of my laptop for hours, a digital ghost hunting for other ghosts. I typed every conceivable combination. Blue Heron Holdings. Richard Walker. Blue Heron. Blue Heron. Philadelphia Real Estate. Richard Walker. Secret partner. The search results were a barren wasteland of ornithology websites, unrelated businesses, and endless articles rehashing the lurid details of my father's trial, none of which mentioned a blue heron. It was as if this part of his life existed in a dimension parallel to our own, completely undocumented, completely in the dark. The frustration mounted a cold, heavy lump in my stomach. He was in prison for life, yet his poison was still seeping into our lives, tainting the very air we breathed. By dawn, my eyes were raw, and my mind was a chaotic mess of paranoia and dead ends. "I'm calling the police," I declared to my mother, who was sitting in an armchair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, not having slept a wink. She hesitated, her brow furrowed with a familiar pain. "And tell them what, Ethan, that someone left a strange key on our doorstep." "After everything that's happened, they'll think we're paranoid, seeing shadows where there are none. The media will catch wind of it. Reporters will be camped on our lawn again, and the peace we fought so hard to build will be gone. All for what a hunch." She was right. The word of a convicted murderer's family was not worth much. We had no proof of a crime, no evidence of a tangible threat. It was just a feeling, a cold premonition. This required a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. There was only one person I could think of who knew how to navigate these murky waters, who had helped us dredge a secret from a locked past once before. I dug through my old contacts, my finger hovering over the name. Mr. Nolan, the private investigator. The call connected after 3 rings. "Nolan," a growly voice answered, sounding tired. "Mr. Nolan, it's Ethan Carter." A long silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could picture him, an old bloodhound, being asked to go on one more hunt he didn't have the energy for. "Mr. Carter," he finally said, his voice heavy with resignation. "I'm retired. The case with your father. It took a lot out of me. I'm done with all that. I'll pay you 3 times your old rate," I said immediately, the desperation clear in my voice. "A retainer up front. You don't even have to leave your house. I just need you to look into something quietly." Another pause. I heard the faint sound of him lighting a match, followed by a slow exhale. "Fine," he grumbled. "But I'm not making any promises. Send me pictures of everything you have. I'll see what I can dig up from my desk." I immediately sent him high-resolution photos of the key, focusing on the carved blue heron, the strange oxidation patterns, and the worn note. And then we waited. The waiting was a unique form of torture. The black sedan from that morning didn't reappear, but the feeling of being watched intensified, wrapping around the house like a suffocating fog. I'd catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision from the window, only to see nothing there. The landline would ring once, a sharp, jarring sound in the quiet house, and when I'd pick it up, there would be only silence on the other end before a soft click. Paranoia. I told myself it had to be, but it felt terrifyingly real. 4 agonizing days later, Nolan called back. "I've got something for you," he said. And for the first time, I heard a spark of the old investigator's thrill in his voice. That blue heron carving on the key, it's not just decorative, it's a maker mark. Belonged to a small family-owned locksmith shop in an industrial part of Philadelphia, specialized in high-security safe deposit boxes and private vaults. The name of the shop was Blue Heron Locksmiths, went out of business almost 28 years ago. My blood ran cold, and the name I asked my throat dry. Blue Heron. That's where it gets interesting. Nolan said I had to call in a serious favor with an old friend at the Federal Tax Bureau to get a look at your father's sealed business archives from back in the day. Turns out Richard Walker was the co-owner of a shell corporation established over 3 decades ago. The company was a ghost used for sensitive off-the-books real estate acquisitions. Guess what it was called? Blue Heron Holdings. I whispered the name, feeling like a curse. Bingo, Nolan confirmed. And the other name on the corporate charter, your father's silent partner, was a man named Daniel Hargrove. Daniel Hargrove. A new name, a new ghost to haunt us. Can you find him? I asked, a sliver of hope piercing through the dread. That's your job, Nolan replied bluntly. I'm a researcher, not a field agent anymore. I found a last known address for him in Philadelphia. According to public records, Daniel Hargrove died of a heart condition 6 years ago, but the property is still occupied. I'm sending you the information now. And Ethan, be careful. The business Blue Heron Holdings was involved in, it wasn't clean. You're poking a hornet's nest. The address appeared on my phone screen. Philadelphia, the city of our nightmares. There was no other way. When I told my mother, I expected her to protest, to beg me not to go back there. Instead, her eyes hardened with a steely resolve I had come to admire more than anything. I'm going with you, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I'm not going to sit here and wait in fear. Richard's life ruined our family once. I won't let his secrets do it again. 2 days later, the familiar skyline of Philadelphia rose to meet our descending plane. The air felt heavy, charged with painful memories. We checked into an anonymous hotel in Center City, a sterile environment far removed from the places that held our ghosts. The address for Daniel Hargrove was in a quiet, older neighborhood in South Philadelphia, a street lined with proud, aging brownstones. It looked deceptively peaceful. We stood before number 325, a well-maintained 2-story house with pots of geraniums on the front stoop. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a woman in her late 50s. She had tired, intelligent eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. She regarded us with a cautious curiosity. "Can I help you? I apologize for the intrusion." I began my prepared speech, suddenly feeling clumsy. "We're looking for information about a man named Daniel Hargrove. We believe he used to live here. He was my father," the woman said, her voice flat, guarded. "He passed away." "Who are you?" "My name is Ethan Carter, and this is my mother, Margaret Maggie Walker." The moment I said the name Carter, I saw a shudder come down in her eyes. A flash of recognition immediately followed by a wall of suspicion. She started to close the door. "I think you should leave. Please," I said, moving quickly to hold the small wooden box out for her to see. "We didn't come here to cause trouble. Someone sent us this. We just need to understand what it means." I opened the lid, revealing the tarnished key. The woman's eyes locked onto the blue heron carving, and her carefully constructed composure crumbled. The defensiveness on her face dissolved into a complex mixture of sorrow and resignation. "You'd better come inside," she said softly, swinging the door open. She introduced herself as Isabel Hargrove, Daniel's only child. The house felt like a time capsule filled with antique furniture and faded black and white photographs. She led us to a dim living room and began to tell a story that had been buried for 28 years. Blue Heron Holdings wasn't a company Isabel set her gaze distant fixed on a memory. It was a predator. My father and Richard Walker, they were sharks. They would find families in crisis, people on the brink of foreclosure, and force them to sell their homes, their businesses for pennies on the dollar. They used threats, legal loopholes, psychological manipulation. They destroyed lives to build their fortunes. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her face was ashen. The wealth she had once believed to be the product of a brilliant businessman was built on the misery of countless people. But there was one deal, Isabel continued, her voice dropping lower. One that went too far. An old warehouse on the river. It belonged to an Irish family, the McKennas. The patriarch, an old man named Patrick McKenna, refused to sell. He'd built his business from nothing in that building. My father and Richard used every dirty trick in the book to ruin him, to force him out. In the end, they succeeded. Patrick McKenna lost everything. He died of a massive heart attack a month later. But his sons swore an oath of revenge on his grave. The McKennas. I repeated the name, feeling heavy and dangerous. They're a proud, hard family. They never forget, Isabel warned. My father lived in fear that they would come back for him. That's why he kept the key. She gestured toward the box. It opens a safe deposit box at a bank in Center City. He called it his insurance policy. Inside is a ledger detailing every single one of Blue Heron's dirty deals, with a special focus on the McKenna case. He kept it in case Richard ever tried to double-cross him. There were 2 keys. My father had one, Richard had the other. I thought that secret was buried with my father. The puzzle pieces slammed into place with horrifying clarity, and the McKennas had returned. They couldn't get to my father in prison, so they came for his heir. They sent the key to me as a message. We know who you are. We know what he did. We know about the ledger. We have to go to that bank. I said, my voice urgent. We have to get that ledger. Isabel looked at me with pity in her tired eyes. You don't get it. If the McKennas sent you that key, they don't just want the ledger. They want something more. They want a debt to be paid in full. Despite her warning, Isabel gave us the name of the bank. It was an old grand institution in Center City, a relic of a bygone era of finance. As we walked through the towering marble lobby, the feeling of being watched was no longer a paranoid delusion. It was a palpable certainty. The safe deposit vault was in the sub-basement, a cold, sterile room that smelled of steel and old money. We presented the key. A bank employee used his own key in the second lock, and a moment later a long, tarnished metal box was placed on the table in front of us. Inside, just as Isabel Hargrove had said, was a thick, black, leather-bound ledger. My hand trembled as I lifted it out. We had it. We had the truth. But as we emerged back into the main lobby, he was there waiting for us. He wasn't what I expected. He was a man my own age, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit with dark hair and cold, intelligent blue eyes. He stood with an air of absolute calm, a polite, unnerving smile on his face. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I was hoping I'd catch you here. My name is Ronan McKenna. I trust you've heard of my family." My mother gripped my arm, her knuckles white. I stepped slightly in front of her. "What do you want?" Ronan's gaze flickered to the ledger in my hand. "That a painful memento. Evidence. The statute of limitations on financial crimes ran out long ago, Mr. Carter. I have no use for the police." "Then what do you want?" I repeated, my voice hard. "Justice takes many forms," Ronan said, his smile never wavering. "Your father and Daniel Hargrove stole my family's future. They took our wealth, our good name, and ultimately the life of my grandfather. That is not a debt that can be repaid with a prison sentence. It is a debt that must be calculated in dollars and cents. The fortune Richard Walker built, the fortune you now so comfortably enjoy, was built on the rubble of my family's life." He took a step closer, and his polite demeanor suddenly felt more menacing than any physical threat. "So I am offering you a choice. You will sign over a significant portion of your inheritance to a restitution fund I have established for the families victimized by Blue Heron Holdings. You will do this quietly, and you and your mother can return to your peaceful life in Austin, Texas." He paused, letting the unspoken threat hang in the cavernous hall. "Or I will use my copy of that ledger's contents along with years of my own research to unleash a legal and media firestorm. I will expose you to the world as the heir to a criminal empire living a life of luxury paid for with the tears of ruined families. I will systematically dismantle your reputation, your business interests, your life, the peace you cherish so much. I will ensure you never know it again." He held out a business card. "You have 36 hours to make your decision. Call me when you have an answer." And with that, Ronan McKenna turned and walked calmly out of the bank, leaving us standing alone in the vast, silent lobby, holding a legacy of poison and faced with a choice more terrifying than death. Back in the sterile silence of our hotel room, the ledger sat on the table. Between us, a dark monument to my father's sins. My mind raced. Could we fight him? A public battle against a man with a righteous cause and evidence on his side would be suicide. Our names would be dragged through the mud, our lives dissected and vilified. But to give in to blackmail to let this man dictate our future. I looked at my mother. She was staring out the window at the city that had brought her so much pain. I expected to see fear, to hear her urge me to pay him to do whatever it took to make him go away. But when she turned to face me, her eyes were clear and brighter than I had ever seen them. They shone with a fire I had only seen once before in the courtroom. "I have spent too much of my life living a lie, Ethan," she said, her voice ringing with newfound steel. "Our peace is worthless if it's bought with dirty money or if it's preserved by staying silent about the suffering of others. We will not run and we will not be blackmailed." "Then what do we do, Mom?" I asked, my own resolve wavering. "He'll destroy us. Then he'll destroy us," she said simply. "But we will face it with the truth. We will control the narrative." An idea began to form in my mind, audacious and fraught with risk, but it was the only path that felt right, the only path that wasn't a surrender. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Ronan McKenna's card. I was going to call his bluff, but not in the way he expected. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting. "Mr. Carter," his cool voice stated. "I trust you have good news for me. I am rejecting your offer," I said, my voice steady, channeling my mother's strength. I heard a beat of silence on the other end, the faintest flicker of surprise. Instead, I continued, "I have a counter-proposal. I will not be funneling money into your private secret fund. I will be using this original ledger and my own resources to establish a public, transparent, and legally sound restitution fund. I will go public with my father's crimes myself. I will work to make amends to every single victim of Blue Heron Holdings, including your family. We are not going to do this in the shadows, Mr. McKenna. We are going to do it in the light." The silence on the other end was longer this time. I had presented him with a scenario he hadn't anticipated. "Why should I trust you?" he finally asked, a note of skepticism in his voice. "Because you have no other choice," I replied, the final pieces clicking into place in my mind. "If you try to destroy me, that money will be tied up in legal battles for decades. You'll get your revenge, but you won't get restitution. But if you work with me, your family and all the others will receive actual justice. The choice is yours. Do you want revenge, or do you want to restore your family's honor? Mr. McKenna, you have 18 hours to decide." I ended the call before he could respond. I looked at my mother and she gave me a slow, proud nod. I had no idea what Ronan would do. I had no idea what kind of storm we had just invited into our lives. But for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of my father's past. I was the architect of my own future. And whatever came next, we would face it together. This journey began with a personal betrayal, with the pain of realizing the father whose love I had always craved wanted to take my life for the sake of money. But it has since unraveled a far greater legacy of sin, a darkness woven from the greed and cruelty of the previous generation. A debt calculated not just in dollars, but in ruined lives. Standing in the ashes of that past, I was faced with the most fundamental choice. Continue to be a victim living in fear and hiding the truth in exchange for a false peace, or accept a toxic legacy I did not create and take on the responsibility of cleaning it up. My father chose darkness. Ronan McKenna, in his own way, was also consumed by the darkness of vengeance. But I couldn't choose that path. Together with my mother, the strongest woman I know, we decided that true justice is not revenge, and true peace cannot be built on a foundation of lies. It must be built with the truth. No matter how painful or ugly the truth may be, the decision to go public to face the consequences and to try and compensate the victims of Blue Heron Holdings was not a heroic act. It was the only act that could truly set us free to break the cycle of sin and secrets that has haunted this family for far too long. The future is still uncertain, and I know a media and legal firestorm is coming. But for the first time, I am no longer afraid of my father's shadow, because I have chosen to step into the light. This story is not just my own. It's a testament to the fact that we cannot choose our past, but we have complete power to decide how we confront it. And that brings me to you who have been listening. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever had to face a family secret, a burden not of your own making? Did you choose to confront it or to forget? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in your own battle is the greatest source of strength. Our journey is not over. My decision will undoubtedly have unforeseen consequences. If you want to join us for the next chapter to see if the truth can truly heal all wounds, please subscribe and turn on notifications. And if this story resonated with you, please share it. Who knows, it might give someone else the courage to face their own darkness. Thank you for listening. Your presence and support are an invaluable source of motivation that helps us keep moving forward on this difficult